when I was in high school, we didn't have any guidance counselors that really sat down and said, what do you want to be? And we were successful farmers, but I realized that I wasn't geared for that. My father was a great inventor and mechanical man, and we did everything on the farm. We did all the mechanical repair of the equipment. So we tear down the engines, do the electrical, do the plumbing. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go to the military because we were being drafted anyway at that time. So I just threw my name in a month early after high school. And they did then test me, and they found out that I had very good mechanical skills. I'm in the 37th Tank Battalion. I think, I'm going to be a tank mechanic. So one day they came out and they said, anybody out there have typing skills? Boy, my hand went up. And I became a clerk typist, and then they moved me later on into 7th Army headquarters, and I got to meet a lot of professional people. And at that point, I ran into lawyers and college graduates, and I thought, hi, I can do that. So I came back, and at that time, my girlfriend that I had in high school had gone to nursing. And I signed up to go to University of Dayton, and I thought, I'll be a mechanical engineer. That's what I like. So I started my classes, and she said, you know, I think you'd be a great doctor. And her brother was into pre-med at UD. So I said, well, I'll take some classes. And I liked it because the greatest mechanical machine there is the human body. And it's so well designed that it just was fascinating. So I went through my pre-med. Then I went on to Marquette Medical School. And I met a physician there who treated scoliosis, Dr. William Blount. And at that time, we would put people in body casts to try to correct their curvature of the spine to make them straight. And we did an awful lot of that. And also, he started doing some instrumentation where we would operate and jack up the spine. So I said, I think I want to be an orthopedic doctor. I want to work with the mechanical parts of the skeleton. So I went on to San Francisco, where there was a program in orthopedic surgery. And while there, the total hip replacement was being released and introduced in the United States. In 1959, John Charnley of England developed a mechanical hip to replace an arthritic hip. This had been a problem for years. Way back in the 19th century, they even carved a perfectly round ivory ball to put in some of their royalty, their knights and that. And it would work. The problem was good anesthetic to do it. They had to get them drunk and use alcohol. Other methods, ether was not around. So there was always this way of trying to develop a good hip joint. And John Charnley came upon the use of a polyethylene and a small ball, and he called it a low friction arthroplasty. And it worked, and he kept it under his domain for 10 years before he would release it for others to use it. So when it was released in 1969, I was in San Francisco and I had a year to go, and we started doing them. And so I started working on trying to develop a knee, because a knee was also a problem. Nobody was having success with it, and when I came to Dayton, I decided I wanted to be back in the Midwest. I like Midwest people, and I like people. So I came back, and I was here with the Far Oaks group, which was then Dr. William West, John Muhlstein, and Hobe Claren. And Hobe helped get Wright State University going. And Dr. West was the third chief of staff at Kettering Medical Center. So I was going and practicing at the lesser hospital, which was Kettering. The big hospital was Mama Valley, and St. E's and Good Sam were here, and Kettering was just young, and it was called the Pea Patch. But they would listen to me because I brought ideas about instrumentation, because we were putting rods and plates and screws and hardware in the body now. And before that, we would cast them, or anybody with a broken leg, a broken arm, would end up in bed in traction for 6 to 8 weeks while it healed. You had to adjust it to keep it lined up while new bone formed around it. So invading the body with hardware was felt to be not wise. But I'd been trained to do that, in our training, and I was the youngest new trained orthopedist in town. But the other hospitals didn't receive new ideas. You had to follow the old team, the good old boys. So all of a sudden a flyer came out that the Mayo Clinic was going to show a new knee for knee joint replacements that they had worked on, and so I went, and that was a half a year after I was in town. And I said, I like this. And so I came back and I ordered it, and the part came in a box, one size, not sterile, no information, nothing, just a part. A metal and a plastic. So you had to decide how you were going to use it. So this became a challenge. So you had to plan it. And we didn't have power tools. We had hand tools, hand drills that you would crank, and hand saws and chisels. And so you had to go into the operating room and chisel off the arthritic bone and put a metal part in a person who was almost bedridden, because we didn't know how it was going to work. So shortly after that, we met with Carl, who was the chief of the engineering department at Kettering. He had a workshop, and he was great. We'd go down there and say, we need this, we need that. And all of a sudden, he'd bring it up, and with joy in his eye, look at this. We would play with it, it would work. So he started helping make tools for us. And then the companies, there were only a few that were trying to make parts. They had ball and socket simple, but a knee joint was complex because of all the ligaments and that. So we continued to work with trying to get the tools so we could put the parts in, and the companies were trying to make new parts, and they were clumsy because engineers were making them, and these engineers were good at building a part for a car or for press for pressing out parts of steel, but they were pretty bold and clunky for a joint. So they were trying to refine all of this. So the people from Zimmer, which was a orthopedic company that was just beginning to get into the hardware end and the implant end, their engineers would come and watch us and then say, well, I think we can do this or that. So they'd bring their tools, and then they'd say, well, we need to modify everything. So we got a thing going on. So in the 70s, we were really just taking people who were bedridden, trying to get them up. And then in the 80s, we were trying to refine instrumentations. And the companies were making instruments, but they needed someone to check them out and see if they fit the hand right, and they did the job. So we got involved in that. But by 1985, I wanted to stick with a partial knee, and nobody had a good one because they only made one or two sizes. And I kept complaining, and they said it's not profitable, there's no reason to it, it's too hard to put in. And finally my wife said, well, why don't you make it? I said, I can't do that. Well, you can design it. So I took that challenge on, and I started at the evening. I took over the dining room table, laid everything out, and I drew plans, and I carved it out on balls of wood. And I would think about it every day. I'd go to the operating room. How would this fit, and how would this work? So finally, I drew the plans up, and I submitted it to the company, Zimmer. And they called, and they said, we want to talk with you. So they agreed that they were interested in building it where they hadn't been before. At least they said not. And so finally they said they wanted to add it on to their existing line. So fortunately it was just me, nobody else. They had two other doctors that were Miller and Galante that didn't do any partial knees, but they wanted to check it out. So they checked it out. And the nice thing was, within 2 years it was built and ready to be marketed, because nobody else interfered with what we were doing, and I got to say what I thought was the best way to do it. So it was released, and it's still the most popular unicompartmental knee because it's user-friendly and the instruments are user-friendly. So now it takes so many years to develop something because they get too many doctors involved, too many engineers, and it's sort of difficult. So we were, again, at a unique time. And so during all this time, I was leaning toward joint replacement. I left the old group. I went on to work by myself because I just wanted to do joint replacements. This was a challenge. And we started needing a place to take care of these because we weren't using traction. We were getting them up. We wanted to get them up and get moving. So we have to have classes with the nurses. with everybody on the floor, even the x-ray technicians, how you can't get them out of bed or move them for fear you might dislocate or damage their part afterwards. So we started to get an orthopedic floor because we were on a surgical floor. So it required that we meet and talk to the nursing staff. And then we would say, this is what we think we need. And then we would go to the next level up and end up getting approval from an administration. And the nice thing was Kettering Hospital was interested in moving ahead because of the engineering genius of Charles Kettering. And so they liked innovative. And actually, Charles Kettering was looking into magnetism and the magnetic part of the human body. And all of a sudden we have now magnetic resonance imaging. But he recognized healthcare way back and liked innovation. And then I met Dr. DeWall. He happened to be my neighbor, but also became a patient of mine because he did eventually needed arthritic knees replaced. And he was working on a heart valve. And he was trying to get it patented and worked on. And I learned that the cost and the expense of doing that and the challenges was such that I just went to Zimmer and said, if I design it, will you build it? And they said, yes. So they took over all the responsibility of marketing it, the legal aspects, and you have to get the approval of the government, the FDA, and they tagged it onto an existing product line so they didn't have to go through all the testing that they did. So I learned from that part, and then they provide the parts, and pretty soon we started teaching other people what to do. I met another wonderful man, a neighbor just a little bit further away, Dr. Ben Schuster. And he was also very innovative, and he was allowed to use his expertise and forward thinking on the heart at Kettering. And so I was just sort of following in their footsteps, watching what they did, trying to work with the human element of the people on the floor, the nurses, and then move up the ladder and incorporate the administrative area because they really didn't know too much about the mechanical part of what we were wanting, but they allowed us to have our own floor and then pick a little bit of our own nursing staff. Those orthopedic nurses are so loyal, they really just stick with the orthopedic floor. They love it. And then when Dr. Schuster donated money for the Schuster Tower, all of a sudden they came to me and said, would you like to have the 5th floor? I said, I'll take the penthouse, that's fine. So we now have a floor and totally dedicated to joint replacements. They're all nice private rooms. They gave us a cot and a sofa because I think it's very important that the spouse or family member be there because you get better care. They're going to watch over their loved ones. They're going to do some of the nursing care. And the fact that if they stay overnight, they're watching them carefully through the night. So we gave them a closet and a sofa, built the bathroom big enough to accommodate them. And when Dr. DeWall was doing heart surgery, many people were coming from a distance. So it was an inconvenience for them to get up at 3 or 2, get dressed, drive to the hospital, then wait until you got back into the operating room for surgery. So they had a guest admit program for the heart patients. So I said, well, if you can do it for the heart, why can't you do it for the hips and the knees? Because our people are coming a distance. Because I grew up north, the farming people liked me, and I liked those people and all the people around. But for the out-of-town people, we said, okay, we will let you come in as a guest admit. So we set up a protocol. It had to be 50 miles. It had to be the first case of the day. They had to be a certain age and all that. And it became so successful that they soon allow all of our total joint patients to come in the night before. Now, all it took was getting environmental services to agree to come as soon as the patient left, start cleaning up the room, and have it turned over by 7 o'clock. So we tell the people, the guest admit means you can come after 7. You have to eat. We're going to give you a bed, introduce you to the people on the floor, and you're officially a patient in the morning when you go to the operating room, but you're a guest and we're not billing insurance company. And that has been very good, and it's part of our program. Now, if you're going to go somewhere and have heart or some surgery you don't know anything about, and years ago, people said, oh, those knee replacements, they don't work. Well, they didn't work at first very well, especially if you didn't have the mechanical skills to know what you were doing. So during that experimental stages, we would start educating the patients, first in my office with tapes, and then later the hospital agreed, it's good. So now we have a pre-op class where they come in 2 weeks beforehand. The nurse, occupational therapist, and physical therapist explain our program. They take an hour and 10 minutes at least to explain it. And then during that time, our hospital-based internal medicine physician sees the patient because she does a much better job of checking heart, lung, kidneys, and getting involved. So she checks off the regular system, gets them ready for surgery because she's going to follow them post-op and get them home safely without problems. So that was added to the protocol. So over these years, we slowly defined what we thought the patients needed to know what's going on. And hospital administration always allowed us to move ahead, and they never interfered. And I don't know that we ever had to sit down and beg because the team always worked so well that they allowed us to move ahead. And I was thinking about, well, could I put a finger on any person at Kettering that led the way? And I think it was just their attitude that, use your common sense, and if it seems logical, they never interfered. And so at all the meetings, they would allow us to vocally say what we thought, what we wanted. And we were able to move ahead. So I'm very proud now that we are well recognized as a joint replacement center with the 30 beds. And all the orthopedic surgeons now agree by philosophy of what we're going to do. And they're all in different practices, pretty much. So we have a meeting once a month where we sit down and we talk with all the people that's part of the joint center, which would include the environmental people who clean the rooms, the nurses, the physical therapists, the hospitalists, the discharge planners, all that. And we talk about how to improve it. So we went and tackled pain management. How do you handle that? And along the way, my first wife, had breast cancer. And in her treatment, they were giving her chemo. And we'd have to go to the chemo center. They'd lay you in a bed, put an IV in, and put the chemo in over a period of hours because it had to go in slowly so it wouldn't kill the rest of the body cells, just those rapidly growing cancer cells. One day I showed up and they said, you can go back to the apartment where you're staying, and this pump is battery operated. It's going to pump the chemo in, and it'll beep when it's finished, and then you can just shut it off and come back tomorrow and we'll unplug it. I thought, that's pretty neat. So the next time we went back for another round, they had a big round ball, looked like a basketball. They said, you don't have to worry now about the battery or that pump failing. This ball is elastomeric, and it's got a valve on it that we set, and it's going to deliver the chemo, and you can take off and do whatever you want to. So if you want to go shopping or whatever. So that worked out neat. And I said, do you have any smaller balls? And they said, no. And they said, well, why? And I said, well, we've been putting numbing medicine into the joint, and it helps them post-op. But it is over after 16 hours, and we don't want to go back and keep sticking needles in. So about a month or two later, the company called and said, we got a ball we're using for kids, and it's smaller. So they sent me one. I said, that's pretty good. It was about 50 cc. So I said, we'll take a case of them. Pretty soon, they wanted to know why we were ordering cases of this ball for $35. Pretty good. Well, we were filling it with the bupivacaine and then putting a needle in the joint and pulling it out through the skin and hooking the ball and dripping medicine in slowly into the joint because you could buy it for different delivery rates. So between pharmacy and myself, we decided what volume we needed, what delivery rate to not be toxic. So we started doing that. We called it a pain ball. One day I says, you can't have that anymore. That company won't give us any more balls. And we said, well, why not? Well, they sold that. One of the technicians came in, saw what we were doing, took pictures, wrote it all down, and they sold that to another company. But you can have it for $350. So we said, well, no. So we went to Baxter and said, we need a pump. What's your smallest pump? And they said, well, we got one here, about the size of a cigarette pack. And they said, you can have it if you use our IV solutions, and now that will provide the pump. And we said, okay, so we did. So we called that pump the ball buster. Because we wanted to bust their balls because they wouldn't give us the pump it, and they were charging it. So while that was going on, a company called OnQ bought the technology. Now this is good because they moved it on, and so the OnQ line now has pain pumps for all kind of things. They taught the OBGYN, the general surgeon, everybody how to put in and use a deliverable pain pump. Ironically, we don't use it anymore. We don't use the MG unicompartmental knee I designed anymore because we move on. That's good. Now we have Exparel, bupivacaine, same medicine, but bound molecularly with a lipid, and that lipid keeps it sort of inactive, and as you put it in the body and it releases over 3 days, it becomes the active form of bupivacaine to numb, and now they don't have to walk around with a ball for 3 days and worry, is the ball working? Or if it's leaking, oh, I'm losing some of that fluid. You put it into the capsule in the pain area, and it's slowly released. And you go see them in the recovery room, and you say, your surgery's over. No, it's not. I don't hurt. So it's wonderful because it really does help. So we've moved so far along. But I had to present the request for Exparel to the administration, and as always, they listened, they trusted, and they supplied it. So we do have the privilege of using it. And so I want to say that, we've moved ahead so much, quietly maybe, but always with the support of the Seventh-day Adventist philosophy. They didn't interfere. And so I've been really happy to have been a part of them. In retrospect, when I came to town, people were going to all the hospitals because you had group practices. And one of my partners was Dr. Mike Harper. And he and I sort of took on Kettering as our challenge because the senior members felt that it was a beginning small place, wouldn't go anywhere. And they wanted to stay in the big hospital. And the Wright State University was going to have a medical school, and they were going to be the ones where all the big stuff came to, and we would be feeding into them. So they had a different philosophy. So we just said, good. We wanted to work with people, so we wanted to help get away from the traction and start putting hardware in and start moving ahead. And they allowed it to happen in general orthopedics. And then in 1980, when I decided to go and just limit myself to joint replacements, they were very supportive then. So as I look back on my career, I've been here 44 years, and I don't want to retire because people are so wonderful to work with. I've got it worked out to the point that I've got all the best help in the world, and I'm not taking call anymore, which is good. Everything's elective. So that part of my life where you had to be on call for emergency situations. So I'm continuing to work because everything is so well tuned and refined that I just get nothing but joy. So those people that are out golfing and they go out and they praise that when they hit a hole-in-one. And I tell my patients, I hit a hole-in-one every day. I feel so good. Every day, every case It's another hole in one because our team in the operating room, same team, same people. Kettering philosophy allowed that. Anesthesia, pretty much the same people. Same room, blocked scheduling. Couldn't get any easier than that. Get up in the morning, come to surgery, have a nice lunch in the doctor's lounge, talk with the people, go to the office, see old patients, see new patients, come home relaxed. And every day was sort of the same thing. So my wife and I talk it over and says, no, we're both happy when we can be working. She's a workaholic. She's a nurse. So now we have, I married my childhood sweetheart. My first wife was from Green Bay, and I met her in medical school. The wife I'm married to now, I knew since she was 4. My parents and her parents were good friends. I went to the military with one brother. Her other brother's a physician that I've known all my life. We've got now 10 children, 20 grandchildren. Life couldn't be any better.
That's neat. But why retire when you're doing something you really love to do?
That's right. And why when you've got the cooperation of the Kettering network, people. Now I could go into the next phase. What happens when I do pass or when I can't operate? So a couple of years ago, they said, well, what we're going to do is the government and the insurance industry and the hospitals, I guess they agreed that we're going to go to electronic medical records. That's reasonable and it's good. And unfortunately, we waited almost 10 years until we got better systems. So with the fact that we're going to go electronic, and I'm a solo practitioner, it's equipment, the equipment's costly, maintenance costly. So I agreed happily after the Far Oaks people joined the Kettering Physician Network, and that's what's happening. You're either part of a network of physicians or network of hospital working as a team. And that's not bad because I always had to work as a team because I was solo. I had to work with the rest of them. So I'm now part of the Kettering Physician Network. The Far Oaks group came on board before me, and I watched that. And then the neurosurgical group with Dr. Bernstein. So they sort of broke the ice, and then I followed on. And I found that that team has been very good. So I'm now a member of not only the hospital, but their physician group. The nice thing is I don't have to worry about maintenance on the digital equipment. They put all the hardware in. They teach us. My employees, they have good insurance, good benefits. My patients will have the support of the network whenever I do pass or retire. So I can now be comfortable knowing that if I want to keep working and working and working, everybody's taken care of. So right now I don't know if there's any new challenges out there other than enjoying every day. So I do look up and I tell my wife this. When I approach the hospital, and I get out of the car, I straighten up, I stand as tall as I can, and I walk through the doors and I say, you know what? Every door opens in front of me. I guess it must be those electronic sensors. So as you walk through the hospital, doors open and you say, good morning. And it's hard to walk through the hospital without seeing your friends. So I have another family of employees. And everybody will tell you that Kettering Hospital workers have voted it as one of the best workplaces. And I hate not to be here. I really do. Know that the day that I would quit and retire would be too tough.
It's great to have a place that feels that good to be at.
Well, the reason I cry is because I know someday I may have to. So I pray. The Lord gives me my hands, my thoughts. And if He continues, I continue to work. And I arrived as a community hospital, no medical school, no trauma centers. And we didn't have, in the emergency room, we had a plastic surgeon who was new, and he wanted to get some work, and an internal medicine doctor, Dr. Beitzel. Snyder was the plastic surgeon. His son now is internist here. And if a person came in that was in a bad accident, they'd want to get the orthopedic surgeon or the neurosurgeon or a general surgeon as soon as they could, because they really weren't geared to do the trauma. And we didn't have traumatologists. We didn't have trauma centers. We didn't have helicopters. So I spent an awful lot of time in the emergency room because a lot of fractures, and we would respond. We would come in immediately. It felt best to get the pain under control and reduce it early on. You couldn't refer to anybody else. And I saw that emergency room department grow and grow and expand. It's been growing forever. And as you look back now and you see the wonders of, and the wisdom of, I think, including a trauma center level 2 now for the community, it's great. And I've watched every floor change, and there's ongoing activities. There are people, I know some of the construction workers, I think, as much as the nurses. They're almost living here, you know. So you see that growing, and you've been part of it, and it's been a wonderful experience. Now we have, the biggest thing is equipment, new equipment. The technology has expanded so much. When we build an operating room, they have to be twice as big to accommodate all the equipment. The hallways have to be twice as wide, the storage areas, the sophistication. And now you even think about the robotics, you know, and all the x-ray equipment that you bring in a room. That's new. The fluoroscopy, that's new. We didn't have that. You'd have to, trying to get a portable x-ray was difficult. They had to go back and hand process it. And it would take 10 or 15 minutes when you're doing a hip fracture to see where you put the nail or whatever, because they had to take it out and do the development of the film chemically by dipping it from solution to solution in a dark room and then bringing it in the room and say, what do you think? Well, by then, you know, you're closing and you're saying, looks pretty good. You know, you had to really know with your hands that, yeah, if it didn't look good, then you have to take all the sutures out and go back and replace it. Well, as a young man, I was full of vim and vigor. And when I would go to the other hospitals, you really, if you request something, it took years, or so difficult to move ahead. And, you know, they didn't have the vision. Kettering had the vision. They were visionaries. They'd already had Dr. DeWall here. And they had Dr. Oberhu here, and then he went to the Valley, but he was part of the heart team. Dr. Schuster was here. Those were the biggest new innovation, having the heart-lung machine that Dr. DeWall helped design, and then the technology that it allowed, and then later on the invasive surgery, or the non-invasive, and the heart catheterizations with Dr. Schuster. Orthopedics was the next new technology, and also then radiology, and then all the equipment that goes along with that. So they were always wanting to allow this new advances in medicine to be utilized. They didn't impede us. Of course, they were thinking of being cost effective. And I don't think we were the first to try the new, nor were we the last to discard the old. But we could bring new technology to be used more quickly here. And so that's what I liked about it. And they were very open to sitting down and listening to you. As a young man, they listened to me as equally as they did with the older people. Where other hospitals, it seemed like there were certain people who were designated leaders, and they had to approve of your idea first. So you were just stymied, trying to move ahead. Virginia Kettering was a superb individual. She eventually ended up with her suite on our orthopedic floor. So we would get to see her when she was in her years that she was spending more time at the hospital there, but she also in the community from the time we came here. We always were benefits of her community involvement. And the uniqueness of the gift shop, that she helped bring all the different items that were unique to the gift shop. But she was always we would see her at the hospital. We would see her in the community, in the arts and the theater and that. So she was just a blessing for Kettering Hospital and for the Kettering and Dayton and Oakwood community. Well, she was very outgoing. She would always be willing to talk and listen to anybody. I think everybody was her friend. But she also knew how to get things done. She knew how to work with the community and the other community leaders. And so she always surrounded herself with people who could make it happen. She would know what she thought she wanted, and then it would happen because she knew how to, I guess, delegate or allow other people. So the hospital also, I think, knew how to allow us maybe to help delegate or let things happen. I never felt they interfered with anything I wanted to do. I don't know if other people felt they had difficulty in moving ahead in medicine. But I always felt that this was a place that you could come and progress and use new ideas and bring on the new technology. If you were not so impulsive that you had to have it now, I would tell people, and I still tell them, especially the young guys, when there's something new comes out, I says, you don't want to be the person to test that on your patients. Let the community do that, because in 2 years, you'll know if it's good or bad. Then you can bring it into the fold. Let somebody else do that. Let the big community research institutions do it. Why do you want to be the first one to have that first brand new piece of equipment? And we sort of use that throughout in our joint center and in our orthopedic service line development. And it's proved to be worthwhile because the other doctors have listened to some of the older ones. And we now are going and looking at bundled care. And we have it ready. We can do that anytime. We've been designated a center of excellence for joint replacements, where big centers like the General Electric and Kroger and Target, and that they're wanting to make sure that centers of excellence for heart, joint replacements, back surgery. So that new technology or the new way of providing care, we're already able to do that. We can be there and compete because we have the model already there. Bundled care is where the facility, like the hospital, would be saying, we're going to send patients to you, and this is what the Medicare would pay. And if you take care of them, there'll be maybe a 10% difference or better price, because you as a center of excellence get the same good, consistent care. But it's up to you, the hospital, to disperse the money. So now you got to make sure the implant you're using, the surgeon, the anesthesiologist, the hospitalist, the pathologist, the physical therapy, post-op home care, all these areas are working as a unit so that there's not wasted money. And we've done that. We don't send people unnecessarily to outpatient physical therapy unless they need it. We do not use the best new implants. We use implants that are reasonable and still work. We don't jump on board for the new technology immediately, but we get rid of the old that we shouldn't need. Can you believe we don't use Ted Stockings anymore? That was so hard to get rid of. And then, also even the robot was tried in orthopedics many years ago, and they broke so many femurs that it never came here. We never gone that way, but there's been a lot of things tried and passed, but we just slowly moved ahead, and to the point that we are a hospital of excellence that can give bundled care, which means it's economical, fewer returns to the hospital, but it's teamwork. And we have that teamwork available. Well, it's hot. I mean, and because that's what's going to be coming down the line for there's three major. It's going to be also for congestive heart failure and heart catheterization. So that's the new way of providing, keeping the cost of care down. Teamwork, agreeing. But we started doing that 10 years ago when the Joint Center started having our monthly meetings, and we drew in as many people as we could into the room. And the big thing is we speak out. You know, everybody speaks up. Everybody's allowed to say what they think. We encourage people challenging. Why do you do that? Well, we bring that up all the time. Why? And we've gotten rid of so much that we don't need to do. Because why are we still doing things that are old? But then if you bring something new on board, the next question, why? And we've always answered it. Well, but we all working together, team. And everybody is happy because we have a group of happy employees. Never heard of a Seventh-day Adventist hospital. I was in training. So I was at a Jesuit college, went to San Francisco, and the Jesuit college was right up the street from the hospital I was at. I was at St. Mary's Hospital. I'm Catholic. I came here and I meet Ben Schuster. He's Jewish. I met Dick DeWall. He's Episcopalian, and I'm Catholic. But the administrators I just knew that there was a Seventh-day Adventist church, Seventh-day Adventist administrators. I did notice that there were a lot of Seventh-day Adventist physicians and administrators, but I didn't know their philosophy at first, and I had no reason to dig deeply into it because everything was running so well. It would have been up for 6 years. So only slowly have I seen their philosophy with their education and their school of nursing and their radiologies and the physician assistants and all the other programs that have come on board. I've slowly absorbed all of their excellence, but I didn't know anything about them. So they've all been very good. I've not had any difficulty at all dealing with them, and I think that they are very honest, moral people who feel that the patient always comes first. And I think they're very good administrators. Going down with Carl Cobb to the workshop, you know, and because he was allowed to build instruments and do things and many, many things throughout the hospital. He contributed an awful lot in that time frame. So we'd always enjoy having him come to the operating room and then going down and watch and changing the design, you know, because we could do it every day. We could go back down and meet with him and talk to him and do it. So that was a lot of fun, being able to be hands-on. And then suddenly they said, okay, he can't do that anymore. They weren't budgeted for it. And so we had to go then and reach out to Zimmer Corporation and let them start designing the equipment. But it was very, very interesting trying to decide how to go into the new day of technology, from using hand drills, where you would have to drill into very hard, arthritic, dense bone. You get tired physically. And then finally we came along and we bought some Craftsman battery-operated drills when they first came out. We would sterilize them in the gas autoclave, which would not use steam, but gas would not damage the parts. And then one day, and they would open them up in the room and let them sit there a little bit to make sure that all the gas was out. One day they opened it and there was nothing but a melted case with metal parts sticking through it like a skeleton. They had steam autoclaved it and melted everything. And it just was sort of shocking. You know, it's like, well, I guess we have to go back to Sears again. So we were buying that kind of stuff and bringing it in, and then fortunately, there was a company called Hall that Zimmer acquired, and they made dental equipment. And the dentists were moving ahead quite a bit in some of the mechanical things. So that was a high-speed pneumatic burr. So now you could burr instead of saw, and it'd take a little while to do it, a lot of bone dust in the air. Then Stryker was a company that was an orthopedic doctor, and he developed a cast saw that would not cut the skin. So he developed that because you used to have to hand cut and the cast off, and that was slow and tedious. And that company then started developing some saws and some drills, and now they have hospital beds, and it's one of the biggest orthopedic supply companies now. And that was an orthopedist. And then there was a Charles Townley who was up in Michigan, and he was married a woman from Dayton, and he was an engineer, designed his own knee and had his own company for a while. And we all sort of worked as teams trying to talk to each other about how you doing this, how you doing that. So one of the earlier cases, we were using the old dental Jordan Day belt-driven drill. Motor drove a belt around an articulated arm, and it burred so slowly the bone, and that was just took so long. But that as we moved into the other improvements with the machinery and the equipment, now instead of several hours, you know, we can do a knee in about 45 minutes, or a hip in about an hour, which is pretty standard for our joint center because of people, personnel, and equipment. Well, sure, but looking at Dayton is loaded with innovative people and the tool and die industry. And when I came to town, I was sort of still an engineering thinking guy, and my next door neighbor had Gem City Engineering, and all my friends turned out to be engineers that I met, and I ran around more with engineers than with doctors. So I was always looking and watching their equipment and watching them develop the new technology. So I was exposed to it on both from the medical end and then in the industry, because we were still industry leaders at that time in the 70s. Well, they didn't stymie innovation. They never tried to stymie anything. They've always looked at what you're doing is it ethical, moral. I mean, and you've got the patient in mind. And so, but in all the meetings, and I try to always be part of some of the committees, we have good interaction to make our final decision. And also the philosophy, and this is very important. Every meeting is started with prayer and somebody who brings maybe 2 or 3 minutes of a little story or something that is very pertinent to what we're going to do at the meeting. So that's, I think, very good. There's not very many places that you're allowed to do that. And as I walk through the hospital after my first surgery and I go through one of the departments, usually that department is having their prayer meeting. And if I open the door and come in, they always invite me, and I stop and I pray with them. Well, I think that physicians, and most of us carry a prayer in our heart when we're at the scrub sink, and we always, sometimes I wonder, why did things go so well? There's a picture as you walk down the hall, and if you're going to go into the administrator office and you look through the window, you'll see the surgeon with Jesus guiding his hand. I think that reflects the philosophy of the hospital. Virginia Kettering did a great job of making this hospital look like a comfortable place to be, with her attention to detail, to the color of the carpet, everything on the wall. She was an interior decorator supreme in the hospital, and nothing was less than perfect. You walk down the hall, and it's still reflected, you know. The only thing we missed, and the piano is still here, it's on the second floor. But that was great too, when we did have the piano player, and I would send my post-surgical family, I say, why don't you go out to the lobby and listen to some of the relaxing music. There was nobody that came along that I bonded with that sort of led me or helped me through everything. As a challenge would come, and if I saw something that I thought needed to be corrected, I would find out who is in charge. Like today, I found that there were some problems in one of the bathrooms. I said, who's in charge of that? To the next person, they tell me, I go to the next level, and I say, here's the problem. I've always been a problem solver. I've never been a complainer. You find the problem, you go to the next level, you go to the next level, and you go to whatever level it takes to get the job done. So I never went to the top level and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to come down here and get this done. I just cooperated with each level that I ran into. So I can't say that there was any one person that had more influence on me than the other. It's just that what I said, nobody got in my way. Nobody said you can't do that. But I didn't step on anybody's toes, and nobody took me to the back room and said, you can't do that. It's just that, you know, and I could go to meetings now, and I just sometimes can't believe the complaints that I hear from some of the people. I said, well, why do you think it has, if it's got to be done, why don't you go and talk to the next level? Why are you complaining to the top committee? Why don't you take care of it yourself little by little? So I can't say that any one person was part of what, they were cooperative. I just meant nothing but cooperation. I meant nothing but wonderful people. You went to like Carl Cobb? Sure. You went to somebody, a head nurse, and you said you didn't have enough nurses on the floor, and you explained why. They would do an analysis. They would work with it. Anything you thought you found that maybe needed correction, they would follow up. So they at least listened to you. The people who work here are happy. I think most of them, a lot of them are Seventh-day Adventists. I think they're all religious. I think the prayer is part. But health care is unique. It is getting a hole in one all the time. Everything you do, you're helping somebody. And you got to listen. And then you can help. There was a tape they showed from the Cleveland Clinic, I think, some years ago. It was very popular, about following a patient through the hospital or all that. And just, you see all of the wonderful things that each person does. And my philosophy is I love talking to the environmental people because it shocks them sometimes. Good morning, how you doing? Anybody you see, and the volunteers, I thank them because they are there. And every time you talk to one person, you see their eyes light up. And so I'm exposed to people every day. Some are patients and some are co-workers, but it's just a wonderful place to work because everybody's happy in their job. There's people that retire early, and when I see new patients, I ask if they're working or if they're going to retire, because I want to know when I put a hip or knee in, are they going to go back to that kind of work? And it's amazing when you watch their eyes and you say, what do you do? Because that's one of the first things. And then if they say, you know, like they're an engineer or where they work, you can see if you want to ask them the next question. Are they happy or not at work? You can tell that just by how they answer, what do you do? And then if you see they're happy and you ask them a couple more questions, they lighten up even more, and the more they talk. And after 2 or 3 minutes of talking, then you ask them about why they're here to see you, but you've already got their confidence and you know about them. So people's work is very, very important, and the happiness at work. There's people that retired at 52. They stood on an assembly line at General Motors putting a screw into a socket, and the people around them were teasing and harassing them because that goes on in those workplaces. There are some people that are considered the buffoon, and everybody pokes fun at them. Well, they want to get out of there as soon as they can. But they were a human being who were mistreated sometimes. But you don't see that here. Things are changing in medicine to the point that it's costly for new equipment, and we have to have new equipment. Uh, Doctors have found that they may not be good administrators. They cannot spend a lot of time as a family practitioner keeping up with all the legal requirements, health requirements. And so when the hospital comes in and takes over and keeps that part under good control, make sure people are compliant, can deliver standard of care universally. So I do know that my nursing staff is involved in going and talking to other nursing staffs about how we get the best patient experience possible from the time they come in until they leave, becoming uniform and working as a team. So we don't have a bunch of different things going on, and we have to become more consistent and uniform in how we deliver care. And since we have a computer base that we all deal with and put information in and share information, we have to also share philosophies of how we're going to do it and whose part is it to maybe change an erroneous entry as far as if that medicine's still being given in that. So we have to now, everybody, not work as more teamwork from the physician's office, computer-based people. So it is a much better system. And with the modern day of communication, with either email, texting, looking at data that's been stored in the computer, it's another new, challenging, exciting time for me. I remember the nurses were a little bit leery when we were going to go paperless. They were scared. They kept papers hidden. They'd write notes, you know. So I said, that's okay. We know what we're doing. We know how to deliver care. These poor people that are telling us how to do it paperless, they're scared to death. They don't know, but they're trying to tell us. So we'll learn from each other. Now my office staff loves the computer, but we didn't put a computer in the room. We still carry paper notes. So they'll print off the face sheet. I know the patient's name. They'll put in the preferred name if they want who's with them. So I can go in and introduce myself, use their name that they want, Connie, not Constance. Fred's the spouse or whatever. I know who it is. And you establish the rapport. And then we enter it into the computer. So we sat down and said, how are we going to use the computer? So we met the computer behind the scenes. We don't put it between us and the patient. We gather data, we enter it later. We take a paper in that's got all their medicines on it. We talk to them and check it off or scribble it out and change it with them visually seeing it, and then we do it quietly behind the scenes. So we've adapted technology, but we did it in our own method. Even though they gave us computers for each room, we had to give them back. We don't use them. You know, we just have them in our offices where we use them behind the scenes. And they've allowed us, to do that. So again, it's not interfering. They're letting us use the technology. They gave us the classes. They told us all of that. And then nobody's ever slapped our wrist for how we delivered it. Our office philosophy is being utilized then because my office staff goes and says how we do it, you know. And a lot of the people are moving away from that computer in the room. And the worst thing is, if you're going to have to use a computer, get everything turned around so that you're facing the patient and you can look at their eyes. Boy, I'll tell you, nothing better than making eye contact. And I scoot in, when I really get serious, I scoot in closer. And when I see an overweight person who's 300 pounds and she needs a hip replacement, but you shouldn't do it at that weight, I get in close and touch and convince her that we love her. And she's got to lose weight because we love her. She's got to take care of her own health because we love her. And I can get her to cry if necessary. I says, you know, do you love that child, that grandchild? She'll cry, she'll die. Or if you die, she's going to really feel bad. And you got to take care of your health. And that's another challenge that you have is how to see each patient. And our philosophy is we meet a new patient every day and we acquire a new friend every day. So even with the computer there and the new technology, we enjoy accepting the challenge. And so we're having a lot of fun with the new technology. I said, it's just like, all of a sudden somebody came to you and said, we got this great big Boeing Superjet, and we're going to let you fly it. All you have to do is learn how to do it. We're going to show you how to take it off and land it. I says, isn't that going to be fun? We're going to have this great big new technology to deal with and to use, and we shouldn't be afraid of it because they're going to help us through it. So if you were told that you were going to take off tomorrow and fly this to San Francisco and back with 200 people, you'd scared to death. But over the way they trained us, it was fun to take on the new technology. I always felt that with the philosophy of Kettering being an innovator, running a community hospital, and wanting to develop and use new technologies in medicine, that Kettering has always tried to look at all new items, and if they seem to be realistic and possible, they dealt with the individual departments to bring on the new technology. And if they didn't have the expertise, they would go out and hire the expertise, such as when they put in magnetic resonance imaging and the protons, and then they were machines, and when they were also PET scanners, and when they were looking for neonatology and the maternity and everything they moved ahead on, they wanted to be up to date, be modern, and yet they would reach out and get, if they didn't have the proper expertise, they would work with the community, the physicians, to bring on board the technology and expertise. And so they helped bring innovation, and they accepted innovation that was brought to them. So if they didn't bring it, then they did not stymie it. We have people all the time, we're always standing there watching them very carefully to see if we're going to have them sit down. But so when people come through, we are aware of that. Mark's been pretty good. He never fainted yet. No, that's right. Now, well, see, if I walk through the halls of the hospital, it's such great joy. I see so many, but somebody will say, Dr. Pohl, turn around, and it's like, who is it? I went up on the rehab unit today, and I'm talking to one of my patients, and one of the therapists comes in and says, that's one of your patients from a couple of years ago, out there and saw you, and she wants you to drop by. I says, well, point her out first so I go to the right person, And then one day, to follow up on this, one day I was in a card shop getting a new card. And in the operating room, we have face masks on, and we sometimes look funny with our hoods and our caps on. And this cute girl comes up and she says, hi, Dr. Pohl. I looked at her eyes. I didn't recognize her as a nurse. I tried to say, gee. Well, finally I said, are you a patient? Did I operate on you? Or what? And she says, Kenny, I'm your cousin. Well, she was now 18. She wasn't that 13-year-old. All of a sudden, she had blossomed. And I thought, gee, it's always sort of a scare when someone says, Dr. Pohl, and you turn around. Is it a friend, a patient, or an employee? So you sort of have to say, how quick can I bring that name up? But that's good, because it does challenge you. One thing I like to say is, was that the right or the left? You can ask them that. And you can say, was that a hip or a knee? I went to the Schuster Center once, and somebody comes in, oh, Dr. Pohl, you did my knees, and they're pulling up their knee, or their pants leg, and showing them all that. And I says, are you sure I didn't do your hip also? Face got red, and they laughed, because, of course, to show their hip incision is a little different than to show their knee incision. I do like to communicate with the patients well. So when it became necessary for us to sign on what site we're going to do, I thought it was very important. And we had been marking the site before, but they said you had to sign your name. Some of the doctors thought that was beneath them, and they would put little signature down, and like you're supposed to find it. And then they were supposed to not start the surgery unless it was right over near where the incision was going to be made. So I accepted that as a challenge. So I would go out, I first wrote my name very big across the hip or the knee, so that they would know that that was it. And then I started putting a smiley face on it and make it big enough. And then I started to put down, well, if it was a farmer, I'd put a tractor, or a dairy farmer, maybe a barn, and a gardener, flowers. So over the years, they know I'm going to put some art on their knee, and I'm not a good artist. But I can draw circles, straight lines, and things like that. I can't do animals well. So they know that I'm going to mark their knee. So last year when I marked one of my hip patients with a nice, beautiful Santa Claus, smartphones are now, all cameras are available. And so the family immediately took a picture of it. A week later for Christmas, I get a Christmas card with his rear end and Santa Claus on the front of it. And so did the floor and my nurses and I guess other people. Frequently now, when I go out and I mark the patient's knees or hip or whatever, they take the picture, and I come back out and talk to them afterwards. They say, "Oh, the grandchildren in Colorado just loved your picture," or this. That's like, it's a whole new way of communication, just by that simple thing. How all of a sudden, that picture is now disseminated to the friends. So now I'm really in a problem. I have to make sure that the art's better, it's more thoughtful, and so it's just another new challenge. Well, now what we're doing is, instead of silver clips, because we can move on technology, we're doing a plastic under the knees, under the skin closure, putting the Ethibond glue on top to seal it so we don't have any leakage, and then we put a clear plastic dressing over the top so we can see the wound to make sure if it's not getting red or there's no leakage or anything. And with the artwork underneath it, at 2-3 weeks, it's still there. So you got to do a better job again with all of that. And it's visible to everybody. Every nurse that comes in the room, they're looking at the wound and that. So I get complaints. They say, why don't you put enough with the flowers, or enough with the Santa Claus, or let's go to something different. So I may have to go to art class. First assistant was in the office. She needs her knee replaced. And then she's going to retire. And she had tears in her eyes. Because she thought that she was going to be able to last as long as I did. She's only 65, and I'm 77, so she knows that she's going to have the knee surgery, and she's going to quit. And they tell me, the anesthesiologist and all the people, that they don't want me to retire until I do it. But the Lord gave me hands and talent, insight, and I cannot refuse it. I have to use it, because that would be the worst thing, is to not take advantage of what he gave you and just throw it away. And so as long as I have a contract for 10 years. And, I thought you were your own boss. And I said, my contract's with the Lord. You keep me healthy, I keep working. I said, so far, we're both keeping up with our side of the bargain. That's still the way it is.